I am Sienna, 33 years old, and somehow still recovering from the trauma inflicted by my family. As a highly successful certified public accountant, I worked relentlessly to escape their toxicity. But I still kept in touch occasionally. Last Sunday, they invited me to a fancy lunch to catch up, but today, they showed up uninvited. I almost choked on my coffee when my sister Kendra pointed around my living room and told my 8-year-old niece, "Harper, one day this beautiful house will be yours." My mother Brenda turned to me with a complacent smile, acting like it was already perfectly settled. I set my mug down and asked, "Since when do any of you have a say about my house?" That was the exact moment I realized my family viewed my success not as an achievement, but as their personal backup plan. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled their entitlement and sent my brother-in-law to federal prison, let me know where you started reading in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you have ever faced family members who severely underestimated your true worth. Growing up in Atlanta meant being surrounded by vibrant ambition, but inside our home, emotional coldness permeated every corner. Brenda always made it clear that Kendra was the cherished golden child, while my rigorous academic achievements were entirely ignored. My childhood became a training ground for strict independence. I poured my soul into my studies, secured a full scholarship to a prestigious university, and eventually purchased my dream property. This stunning 5-bedroom lake house on Lake Oconee was my private sanctuary, far from their suffocating expectations. That Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting at my dining table finalizing a massive tax strategy for a corporate client. The house was perfectly silent, save for the gentle lapping of the lake water against the wooden dock outside. Then the heavy deadbolt of my front door clicked loudly. I froze in my chair. I lived alone, and I certainly was not expecting any company. The solid oak door swung violently open, hitting the entryway wall with a loud, echoing thud. Brenda marched in first, carrying a massive stack of folded cardboard moving boxes. Right behind her was Kendra, aggressively dragging Harper by the hand. Bringing up the rear was Trent, Kendra's deeply entitled white husband. Trent was a notorious tech entrepreneur whose primary talent was burning through investor money and radiating completely unearned confidence. He dropped a heavy, overstuffed box right onto my pristine hardwood floor. I heard the sickening sound of the expensive wood scratching beneath the heavy weight. "What on earth are you doing?" I demanded, pushing my laptop aside and standing up immediately. "How did you get in here?" Trent completely ignored my question. He walked past me with absolute entitlement, heading straight for my custom wine fridge. He pulled out a bottle of vintage Cabernet that I had been saving for a special occasion, rummaged through my drawers until he found a corkscrew, and popped it open. "Relax, Sienna," Trent said, taking a long, obnoxious gulp straight from the bottle. "My startup just needs a little change of scenery to impress some new angel investors. The city is simply too noisy for my creative process. We are moving in." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer magnitude of his delusion. "You are absolutely not moving into my house, and you need to put my wine down before I call the police." Brenda stepped directly between us, her face twisting into a furious scowl that immediately transported me back to my miserable childhood. "Do not speak to your brother-in-law like that, Sienna. Have some basic respect. Family helps family, and right now Trent and Kendra desperately need a place to stay." "I do not care what they need," I shot back, stepping around my mother to confront Trent face to face. "This is my private property. I asked you how you got in here." Brenda waved her hand dismissively, walking over to my expensive leather sofa and sitting down as if she owned the entire estate. "I took your spare key from your purse when you came over for Thanksgiving dinner last month. I knew you would not just hand it over, always acting so incredibly stingy and superior. You are a single black woman with no husband and no children. What do you possibly need 5 huge bedrooms for? It is completely selfish to hoard all this beautiful space when your own sister's family is struggling. Struggling? I asked, looking furiously at Kendra, who was already guiding Harper down the hallway toward the master suite. Kendra, get out of that hallway right now! Kendra stopped and turned around, crossing her arms defensively across her chest. Do not yell at me in front of my daughter. Trent is just going through a temporary cash flow issue with his new app development. We had to leave our luxury apartment in Buckhead, but it is only a minor setback. This huge house is perfectly fine for us to use until Trent secures his next round of funding. Trent wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, leaning casually against my granite countertops. Exactly. Look at it this way, Sienna. You get to be the cool aunt who helps out. Besides, a woman living all alone out here in the quiet woods is very dangerous. It is much better for everyone if there is a strong man around the house to keep things secure. My blood boiled instantly. The condescending, misogynistic undertone of his comment was absolutely enraging. He was standing in a massive house I bought with money I earned from grinding through a grueling financial career, drinking my expensive wine, and telling me I needed his pathetic protection? I grabbed my cell phone firmly. I stared directly into his smug, unbothered eyes, refusing to let him see even a single ounce of fear or intimidation. I knew immediately that this was not merely a boundary violation. This was a hostile invasion. They were attempting to conquer my safe haven, and I was ready for war. Kendra completely ignored the tense standoff between her husband and me. Instead, she breezed past the kitchen island, pulling Harper along as she began a self-guided tour of my home. Her designer heels clicked aggressively against the hardwood floors I had painstakingly restored last spring. I watched her in absolute disbelief as she bypassed the guest rooms entirely and headed straight for the master suite at the very end of the hall. The sheer audacity of her entitlement left me temporarily speechless. I followed closely behind them, my heart pounding with a volatile mixture of deep rage and utter disbelief. My peaceful, productive afternoon had been completely destroyed by their relentless intrusion. When I finally reached the doorway of my own bedroom, the scene unfolding inside made my blood run absolutely cold. Kendra was running her hands over my custom headboard, admiring the vaulted ceilings and the view of the lake through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Harper was bouncing on the edge of my mattress, her dirty sneakers leaving faint marks on the pristine white duvet cover I had just purchased. I almost choked when my sister turned to point around my bedroom and told my oblivious 8-year-old niece, "Harper, one day this beautiful house will be yours." My mother, Brenda, had quietly followed us down the long hall and stood right behind me. She turned to me with a highly complacent smile, acting like this ridiculous inheritance was already perfectly settled. The casual way they were dividing up my living, breathing life was truly horrifying. It was as if I had already passed away, and they were simply looting my corpse for their personal benefit. I turned sharply to face my mother and asked, "Since when do any of you have a say about my house?" Brenda did not even flinch. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening into the cold, calculating mask she always wore when she was about to deliver a lecture. "Do not be so dramatic, Sienna," Brenda replied coldly. "It is just common sense. Look at you. You are a single, 33-year-old black woman with no husband and no children in sight. You spend all your time working and hiding away in this massive 5-bedroom estate. It is selfish to hoard all of this space and luxury while your own family is struggling to survive." "Struggling?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "Trent drives a luxury vehicle, and Kendra buys a new designer handbag every month. That is not struggling, Mom. That is financial negligence. You cannot subsidize a luxurious lifestyle on failing business credit, and then demand that I surrender my hard-earned home to bail you out. You have no idea how business works," Brenda snapped back, defending the white son-in-law she had always placed on a pedestal above her own daughter. Trent is building a massive technology empire. Startups require huge amounts of capital, and right now, his business is just experiencing a temporary dry spell. He needs a peaceful environment to secure his next round of funding. Meanwhile, you have empty rooms collecting dust. You should be offering this house to them willingly. Instead, you are acting like a greedy stranger. I stepped into the bedroom and pointed firmly at the door. Harper, please go wait in a living room, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Harper looked at her mother, who sighed and nodded. Once the little girl was out of earshot, I turned my full fury onto Kendra and Brenda. I bought this house with money I earned from working 80-hour weeks, I stated clearly. I skipped vacations, I missed holidays, I sacrificed my personal life to build a career in a male-dominated financial industry that constantly wanted to see me fail. I did not inherit a single dime from you, Mom. You never even helped me pay for my college textbooks. And I certainly did not marry into money. Everything in this house belongs to me alone. It is not a family asset to be redistributed just because Trent cannot manage his own startup. Kendra rolled her eyes, stepping away from the bed and leaning casually against my mahogany dresser. You always make everything about how hard you work. You are just bitter because you are alone. Trent is a brilliant innovator. He is trying to create generational wealth for our family. You just punch numbers into a calculator all day. This house is perfectly set up for a family, and we are a family. You could easily move into a one-bedroom condo in the city and be perfectly fine. The sheer disrespect took my breath away entirely. They genuinely viewed my success as a public resource, a communal safety net for their own terrible decisions. In their eyes, my hard work was merely a backup plan for Trent's inevitable failures. I looked at Brenda, waiting for her to correct Kendra's outrageous demand, but my mother was nodding in agreement. Your sister is absolutely right, Brenda said, her voice dripping with maternal condescension. You have always been too independent for your own good. It makes you cold and unapproachable. A real woman supports her family unconditionally. Trent is under an enormous amount of pressure right now. His investors are demanding immediate results, and the stress is tearing their marriage apart. You have the power to fix this problem, Sienna. You have the space, the stability, and the financial means to help them get back on their feet. I am not a charity organization, I replied, my voice dropping to a dangerously low register. If Trent is under pressure, he can get a regular job like the rest of the world. He is not moving into my sanctuary. Now pack up those boxes and leave. Trent sauntered down the hallway and appeared in the bedroom doorway holding my wine. He flashed his signature arrogant smirk before pulling out a thick, folded legal document, preparing to deliver what he thought was his ultimate winning blow in this family war. Trent unfolded the thick legal document with a dramatic flick of his wrist, holding it up like a winning lottery ticket. The black text at the top read "Quitclaim Deed" in bold, unmistakable letters. He took another sip of my wine, completely unbothered by the rage radiating from my side of the room. He slammed the bottle onto my mahogany dresser, leaving a red ring on the wood. I had my lawyers draft this yesterday, Trent announced, tapping the paper. It is a standard transfer. You sign right here, and the ownership of this lake house transfers directly to my new limited liability company. It is a very simple, clean transaction. No messy real estate agents, just a signature to save our family from a minor financial inconvenience. I stared at the document, comprehending the audacity of his demand. You want me to sign over a property I purchased with my own cash? You want me to hand you the keys so you can do what exactly? I am going to leverage it, obviously, Trent replied, rolling his eyes. My startup is on the verge of a massive breakthrough, Sienna. We are talking about revolutionizing the digital logistics sector. but my current investors are getting anxious about our quarterly burn rate. I need to secure a $2 million bridge loan to keep the servers running. The bank wants tangible collateral. Since you have this paid-off asset just sitting here, doing nothing, it makes perfect business sense to use it. Once my company goes public, I will buy you a bigger house. You are completely out of your mind, I said. You are asking me to risk everything I have ever worked for to subsidize a failing app that has not generated a single dollar. If you default on that loan, the bank will seize my home. I will be left with absolutely nothing while you file for bankruptcy and walk away unscathed. I am a certified public accountant, Trent. I know how commercial lending works, and I know a terrible investment when I see one. The answer is absolutely not. Kendra stepped forward, her face twisting into a furious scowl. You are so incredibly selfish, Sienna. Trent is offering you a chance to be part of something huge. We are trying to build generational wealth for Harper. If Trent loses his company, we lose everything. We will have to pull Harper out of her private school. We will have to sell our cars. Is that what you want? Do you want to see your own niece living in poverty just because you are too stubborn to sign a piece of paper? Your financial mismanagement is not my emergency. I shot back, my voice echoing loudly off the vaulted ceilings. You have been living far beyond your means for years, Kendra. You lease luxury vehicles you cannot afford. You buy designer clothes to impress people who do not care about you. And now that the bill has finally come due, you want to sacrifice my home to save your facade? I will not allow it. Suddenly, Brenda stepped directly into my line of sight. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and devoid of any maternal warmth. She snatched the quitclaim deed from Trent's hand and shoved it aggressively against my chest. You will sign this paper right now, Brenda commanded, her voice dropping to a menacing, authoritative tone. I did not raise a greedy, heartless daughter. I sacrificed everything to put food on the table when you were growing up. I worked long hours so you could sit in your room and study your little books. You owe your entire successful career to the foundation I built for you. Now it is time to pay this family back. You never paid for a single textbook, I argued, my voice shaking with raw, unfiltered anger. I took out student loans. I worked night shifts at a diner to pay my rent. You took the college fund my grandfather left me and used it to pay off Kendra's credit card debt when she was 19. You have prioritized her entire life while leaving me to fend for myself. I owe you absolutely nothing. Brenda's face flushed with pure, unadulterated rage. She raised her hand and pointed a trembling finger directly at my face. Family is blood, Sienna. We stick together through thick and thin. Trent is your brother. He needs this house to provide for my granddaughter. If you refuse to sign this document today, you are making a permanent choice. Sign it right now, or you are not my daughter anymore. The ultimatum hung heavily in the air, chilling the room. For 33 years I had craved her validation. I had chased her approval through promotions, high salaries, and perfect behavior. But looking at her now, seeing her ready to destroy my life to protect a lazy, entitled white man who refused to get a real job, the final remaining thread of my childhood loyalty snapped completely. I reached out and took the quitclaim deed from her hand. Trent smirked, reaching into his jacket pocket to pull out a silver fountain pen. He held it out to me, fully expecting my ultimate surrender. Instead of taking the expensive pen, I gripped the thick legal paper with both hands. I stared directly into my mother's cold eyes and ripped the document straight down the middle. The sharp sound of tearing paper echoed loudly in the tense silence. I ripped it again, destroying his scheme. I dropped the torn, shredded pieces directly onto the hardwood floor at Trent's shoes. I guess I am no longer your daughter, then, I stated, my voice dangerously calm and steady. Get out of my house immediately. You have exactly 2 minutes to carry your boxes out that front door before I call the local police and have you all arrested for trespassing." Trent glared furiously right at me, his face turning pale with absolute uncontrollable rage. He stood frozen in the center of my bedroom, staring at the shredded pieces of his pathetic financial rescue plan scattered across the floor. For a fleeting second, the arrogant facade crumbled, revealing the desperate, financially ruined man he truly was. But men like Trent do not handle rejection with grace. His shock rapidly morphed into a vicious, cornered malice. He stepped forward, invading my personal space, his voice dropping to a harsh, threatening whisper. "You think you are so untouchable," Trent sneered, his face mere inches from mine. "You sit up here in your ivory tower, thinking your little accounting career makes you better than us? I know exactly how much your firm values its pristine public image, Sienna. I know partners at your company. If you do not sign a new copy of that deed by tomorrow morning, I will personally make sure your corporate reputation is completely destroyed. I will ruin you." I did not back away. I held my ground, meeting his furious gaze with absolute ice. "Are you threatening me in my own home?" I asked quietly. "It is a promise," Trent spat. "You are going to regret this." Brenda grabbed Kendra by the arm, sensing that the situation was escalating beyond her control. She pulled Harper toward the hallway, throwing one last look of sheer disgust over her shoulder. "You are dead to me," my mother declared. "Do not bother showing up for Thanksgiving or Christmas. You have made your bed and now you can die in it, alone." "That is the best gift you have ever given me," I replied. Trent scoffed, turning on his heel and marching down the hallway. I followed them out to the driveway, watching closely as they angrily shoved their cardboard boxes back into Trent's luxury SUV. The irony of him driving a $100,000 vehicle while begging me for a bailout was absolutely astounding. Kendra slammed the passenger door so hard the windows rattled. Trent aggressively backed out of the driveway, spinning his tires and kicking up gravel as he sped down the quiet lakeside road. I stood on the front porch and watched their taillights disappear around the bend. Most people would have collapsed into a puddle of tears after being disowned by their own mother. I did not shed a single tear. The heavy, suffocating weight of lifelong familial obligation had finally been lifted off my shoulders. I took a deep breath of the crisp Georgia air, feeling lighter and more powerful than I ever had in my entire life. My first move was securing my perimeter. I walked back inside, locked the heavy front door, and immediately pulled out my cell phone. I dialed the emergency number for my private security firm. A representative answered on the second ring. I instructed them to dispatch a technician to my property immediately to change every single physical lock on the estate. Furthermore, I upgraded my smart home monitoring system, authorizing facial recognition alerts and perimeter breach notifications. I wanted a digital record of anyone who even thought about stepping onto my driveway. Once the security measures were firmly in place, I walked into my home office and sat down at my desk. It was time to switch from defense to offense. I opened my encrypted laptop and dialed the direct line of my private wealth manager, Marcus. "Good afternoon, Sienna," Marcus answered professionally. "What can I do for you today?" "I need you to run a comprehensive background check on a tech startup called Velocity Logistics," I instructed, pulling up a blank notepad on my screen. "The founder is Trent Sterling. I want a full breakdown of his corporate debt structure, his outstanding liabilities, and the names of his primary creditors. I also need you to check the liquidity status of Vanguard equities. We might be making a substantial, aggressive acquisition very soon." "Consider it done," Marcus said without hesitation. "Vanguard currently has more than enough liquid capital to absorb a distressed portfolio. Should I prepare the legal team for a hostile takeover?" "Not yet," I replied, typing Trent's name into my notes. Just gather the intelligence. I want to know exactly who he owes money to and how desperate he actually is. He made a threat against my career today, and I need to be fully prepared when he inevitably strikes. I ended the call and leaned back in my leather chair. My family genuinely believed I was just a highly paid employee who punched numbers into spreadsheets for a living. They had absolutely no idea that I had invested heavily in early-stage cryptocurrency and commercial real estate over the past decade. They did not know that I was the sole proprietor of Vanguard Equities, a shadow holding company worth tens of millions of dollars. They thought they were bullying a defenseless, lonely woman. They did not realize they had just declared war on a financial powerhouse. The evening crept in slowly, casting long, dark shadows across the surface of the lake outside my window. I heated up a simple dinner and poured myself a fresh glass of wine, savoring the profound silence of my secure home. Despite my outward calm, my mind was racing with calculated strategies. I knew Trent's massive ego would not allow him to walk away humiliated. His entire sense of self-worth was tied to his perceived superiority over me. He was arrogant, desperate, and dangerously entitled. He would undoubtedly try to make good on his threat. Just before midnight, as I was finally preparing to go to bed, my cell phone buzzed loudly on my nightstand. The sudden noise shattered the peace of the bedroom. I reached over and picked up the device. A notification banner glared brightly across the screen. It was an urgent, highly flagged email sent directly from the Executive Human Resources Department at my accounting firm. I unlocked and opened the message. The subject line read, "Urgent mandatory meeting regarding serious ethical violation." The message was brief, commanding my presence in the conference room at exactly 8 o'clock the following morning. It instructed me to bring my company laptop and keycard. A cold realization washed over me. Trent had executed his threat with ruthless efficiency, aiming directly at the one thing I had spent my adult life protecting. My career was my armor, and he was trying to strip it away. I closed the laptop and forced myself to sleep. Panic is a luxury I could not afford. When I walked into the glass-walled conference room on Monday morning, the atmosphere was suffocating. 3 senior partners and the head of human resources were sitting stiffly around the mahogany table. They did not exchange their usual morning pleasantries. The head of human resources, Patricia, pushed a thick manila folder across the polished wood toward me. She folded her hands tightly, looking at me with profound disappointment and strict professional detachment. "Sienna, we received an anonymous package at our headquarters late last night," Patricia began, her voice devoid of warmth. It contained several internal routing documents and offshore wire transfer logs. These documents strongly suggest that you have been systematically embezzling funds from 3 of our high-net-worth clients and funneling the money into a cryptocurrency wallet. The evidence provided is extensive, highly detailed, and absolutely damning. We take these matters incredibly seriously. I opened the folder, scanning the forged bank statements and falsified authorization signatures. The sheer volume of the fabrication was impressive. Trent had utilized his tech industry connections to generate a sophisticated paper trail. The IP addresses and digital signatures were designed to look legitimate to anyone who did not know my actual accounting methodology. He framed me for federal wire fraud, a crime that could carry a 20-year prison sentence and strip me of my CPA license. "These documents are entirely fabricated," I stated, keeping my voice perfectly level. "This is a malicious retaliation from an estranged family member who attempted to extort me for a $2 million property transfer yesterday afternoon. I can provide security footage of him trespassing at my home and making verbal threats against my corporate reputation. I am completely innocent of these manufactured charges." The senior partner sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sienna, you have been a stellar asset to this firm for years. However, the nature of these allegations involves federal financial regulations. We have a strict fiduciary duty to our clients. We cannot simply take your word for it. Because of the severity of these claims, we are legally required to initiate a full internal audit. Effective immediately, you are placed on unpaid administrative leave, pending a comprehensive review. We need your access card right now. I did not argue. Arguing with corporate compliance officers is a waste of breath. I quietly detached my access badge, set my electronic devices on the table, and walked out of the building with my head held high. When I reached the parking garage and sat inside my car, my personal cell phone vibrated in my purse. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a text message from Trent. It contained absolutely no words, just a single, mocking, smiling face emoji. He actually believed he had broken me. He thought suspending my salary would force me to surrender my lake house out of desperation. He had no idea that my accounting salary was pocket change compared to my hidden wealth. Instead of panicking, I drove straight back to my secure sanctuary. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, walked into my home office, and booted up my encrypted desktop. If Trent wanted to play dirty financial games, he picked a fight with the wrong woman. I did not just sit idly by waiting for Marcus to hand me the answers. As a top-tier certified public accountant, forensic financial auditing was my absolute specialty. I poured myself a second cup of dark roast coffee, cracked my knuckles, and began dissecting the fabricated evidence Trent had anonymously mailed to my human resources department. He had clearly hired a black hat freelancer on the dark web to generate the fake offshore wire transfer logs. To the untrained eye of a standard HR compliance officer, the routing numbers and cryptocurrency wallet addresses looked incredibly intimidating and thoroughly legitimate. But Trent was a tech entrepreneur who focused on flashy user interfaces and venture capital pitches. He fundamentally misunderstood the rigid, unyielding architecture of institutional banking. I opened a specialized forensic tracing software on my encrypted desktop, a tool I usually reserved for unraveling complex corporate tax evasions. Within 45 minutes, I found the fatal flaw in Trent's grand sabotage. The fabricated banking logs claimed I had routed client funds through a server in the Cayman Islands on a specific Tuesday at 3 p.m. However, crossing that data with the actual blockchain ledger of the cryptocurrency wallet he implicated, I immediately noticed a stark chronological discrepancy. The blockchain timestamp for the wallet creation occurred exactly 24 hours after the alleged embezzlement transfers. You cannot wire money into a digital wallet that does not legally exist yet. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face. Trent's arrogance had caused him to rush the execution. I dug deeper, tracing the IP address embedded in the metadata of the fabricated PDF files. The freelancer had masked their origin, but Trent had been careless enough to open and review the final documents on his personal home network before printing them. I pinged the digital footprint straight back to the residential Wi-Fi router of his luxury apartment in Buckhead. I meticulously compiled screenshots, server logs, and blockchain ledger receipts into a secure, time-stamped file. I wasn't just going to clear my name at the accounting firm. I was going to hand the federal authorities a neatly wrapped digital confession of interstate corporate sabotage. But I needed to understand exactly why Trent was accelerating his attacks so recklessly. My private investigator, Elijah, provided the missing puzzle piece just before noon. Elijah sent a secure encrypted audio file to my terminal. He had successfully tailed Trent to a high-end exclusive coffee shop in the financial district. Trent was having an emergency meeting with his primary angel investor, a ruthless venture capitalist named Richard Vance. Through the discreet parabolic microphone Elijah had aimed at their patio table, I listened to the crystal-clear audio of Trent's fragile empire crumbling in real time. "I am pulling our Series B funding, Trent." Richard's voice was sharp and entirely devoid of sympathy. "Velocity Logistics has missed 3 consecutive quarterly projections. Your user acquisition cost is astronomical, your servers are outdated, and your burn rate is entirely unsustainable. You promised us a revolutionary logistics algorithm, but my tech analyst reviewed your back-end code yesterday. It is a disaster. You are running a sinking ship. Richard, wait. You can't just pull the plug. Trent's voice cracked completely, lacking its usual arrogant bravado. The sheer panic in his tone was delicious to listen to. We just need a temporary bridge loan. $2 million, keeps the servers running, and covers the payroll for the next 6 months. The algorithm is almost finalized. I have personal assets I can leverage. I have a massive lake house property in my family. I don't care about your family's real estate, Trent, Richard replied coldly. The sound of a chair scraping against the concrete indicated the investor was standing up to leave. You have until Friday to pay back the initial commercial leverage loans you guaranteed with my firm, or we are initiating an aggressive asset seizure. Your company is dead, Trent. Do not call my office again. I paused the audio recording, leaning back in my leather executive chair, letting the profound silence of my lake house wash over me. The sheer, intoxicating magnitude of his desperation was now perfectly clear. Trent wasn't just trying to move into my home to save face. He was quite literally fighting for his financial life. He had over-leveraged his entire existence on a faulty app, and the wolves were finally at his door. If he didn't secure $2 million by Friday, Richard Vance and his venture capital firm would strip Trent of his company, his luxury vehicles, and his entire artificial identity. He would be exposed to the world, and more importantly, to my materialistic mother and sister, as an absolute fraud. That was why he was so desperate to steal my pristine, paid-off estate. He needed a massive, tangible asset to use as collateral for a predatory shadow loan. While I was waiting for my private wealth manager to send over the background check on Trent, my phone began to vibrate relentlessly. Notification after notification flooded my screen. I opened my social media applications and immediately saw why. My mother Brenda decided to escalate the war to the public sphere. She had posted an emotional, manipulative video to the extended family's private Facebook group. In the video, Brenda was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching a tissue to her chest. She delivered an Oscar-worthy performance. She cried that I had completely abandoned my blood, that I had violently kicked her out of my house, and that I was actively trying to make my innocent 8-year-old niece homeless. She painted me as an elitist sellout who had turned her back on her community. The comments beneath the video were vicious. Aunts, uncles, and distant cousins were flooding my inbox with hateful, vitriolic messages. They called me greedy and demanded that I give Trent the house immediately. I read the messages with absolute, unwavering indifference. Their opinions meant nothing to me. I muted the group, blocked the incoming numbers, and turned my full attention back to my computer screens. The intelligence report from my wealth manager had just arrived in my secure inbox. I clicked open the file detailing Trent's actual financial footprint. The reality of his failing business, Velocity Logistics, was far worse than I had anticipated. Trent was not just struggling to secure funding, he was drowning in massive, high-interest toxic debt. He had taken out millions in leveraged loans from predatory commercial creditors. He was severely delinquent on all his payments, and his startup was bleeding cash at an exponential rate. He was running a glorified Ponzi scheme to fund his luxury lifestyle in Buckhead. I scrolled down to the bottom of the comprehensive report analyzing his creditor list. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Trent was absolutely desperate, backed into a corner, and legally exposed. He tried to ruin my life by cutting off my corporate salary, completely unaware that he had just handed me the exact roadmap I needed to destroy his entire existence. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus back immediately. "I have read the financial report," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet of my home office. "Trent's company, Velocity Logistics, is holding $2 million in defaulted commercial loans across 3 private lenders. I want Vanguard Equities to acquire all of that debt by the end of the business day." Purchasing distressed debt from those specific lenders will require an aggressive premium, Sienna. Marcus cautioned, his typing audible through the speaker. Are you absolutely certain you want to absorb this level of toxic liability? I am not absorbing a liability, I corrected him firmly. I am purchasing a weapon. Offer them a 10% premium on the principal balance. They will be thrilled to offload a failing technology company bad paper. I want Vanguard to be Trent's sole exclusive creditor before the sun sets today. Marcus confirmed the orders without further hesitation. I closed my encrypted laptop and grabbed my car keys. As I drove toward the city, my phone continued to light up with notifications. Brenda's vicious smear campaign was gaining massive traction online. My Aunt Valerie left a scathing voicemail accusing me of betraying my roots and acting like a corporate sellout. My cousin David texted me a long, arrogant paragraph about how Black families need to stick together in a system designed to tear us apart. The hypocrisy was absolutely staggering. They were weaponizing our cultural solidarity to defend an entitled white man who was actively trying to steal my property and destroy my professional career. I did not engage with any of them. Responding to flying monkeys is a useless endeavor. I simply turned off my notifications and focused on the highway. Vanguard Equities was located on the top floor of a sleek glass building in the heart of Buckhead. I walked past the receptionist, flashing my private key card. No one in my family knew this place existed. To them, I was just a woman who crunched numbers for a boss. They had no idea I was the boss. My legal team was already waiting in the main conference room when I entered. We have secured the debt portfolios, my lead attorney David announced, sliding a thick stack of contracts across the table. The original lenders were incredibly eager to wash their hands of Trent Sterling. Velocity Logistics is effectively running on fumes. By purchasing this debt Vanguard Equities now holds, the primary lien on all of his business assets, his intellectual property, and his remaining corporate bank accounts. If he misses his next payment cycle, which is due this Friday, you have the legal authority to seize everything he owns. I picked up a heavy silver pen and signed my name on the dotted lines. With a few strokes of ink, I had successfully captured Trent's entire financial future. Do not notify him of the transfer just yet, I instructed my team, sliding the folders back to David. Let him believe he is still dealing with his original lenders. I want him to feel perfectly comfortable while he continues to dig his own grave. Before leaving the Vanguard Equities building, I made one final crucial stop on the 7th floor, which housed my elite digital marketing and cyber intelligence division. If I was going to force Trent to commit a federal crime, I could not leave his choice of lender to random chance. I needed to guide him invisibly, making him believe he had discovered a miraculous lifeline entirely on his own. I walked into the glass-walled strategy room and summoned Sarah, my brilliant director of digital marketing. Sarah was a former data scientist who understood human psychology and search engine algorithms better than anyone in the state. I need to activate Apex Capital Solutions, I instructed, referencing a dormant, fully licensed commercial lending LLC that Vanguard Equities kept in our corporate portfolio for high-risk acquisitions. Spin up a premium, highly professional landing page. Make it look sleek, aggressive, and flush with institutional capital. The primary marketing copy needs to emphasize rapid bridge loans, distressed asset leveraging, and minimal credit verification. I want it to look like the ultimate safety net for a desperate tech founder. Sarah's fingers flew across her mechanical keyboard. Consider the site live within the hour, Sienna. Who is our target demographic? An audience of one, I replied, sliding a folder containing Trent's personal cell phone number, his IP addresses, and his vehicle's GPS identifiers across the table. Trent Sterling. I want you to initiate a total digital geofence around his luxury apartment in Buckhead, his favorite coffee shops, and his failing startup's office space. Buy every single search engine keyword associated with fast commercial loans, real estate collateral, bridge capital, and no credit check business funding. When he opens his browser, when he scrolls through his social media, or when he reads a financial blog, I want Apex Capital Solutions to be the only viable advertisement he sees. Suffocate his digital ecosystem. Force our trap to the absolute top of his search algorithm. Sarah grinned, a sharp, predatory look in her eyes. We will drop targeting pixels on all his devices. By tomorrow morning, his phone will practically be begging him to apply for a loan with us. He won't even realize he's being herded. I thanked Sarah and finally took the private elevator down to the parking garage. As I sat in the driver's seat of my vehicle, my encrypted tablet buzzed on the passenger seat. It was an urgent update from Elijah, my private investigator. Subject's marriage is currently imploding. Elijah's text read. Intercepted audio from the balcony of their Buckhead apartment. The financial stress has officially broken their facade. You need to hear this. I tapped the attached audio file, leaning back against my leather headrest as the crystal-clear recording filled the quiet cabin of my car. The sound of aggressive, panicked screaming immediately assaulted my ears. My card was declined, Trent! Kendra's voice was completely hysterical, stripped of the polished, superior tone she usually paraded around the family. I was at Neiman Marcus with the other school mothers, and my platinum card was declined for a simple $200 lunch. Do you have any idea how profoundly humiliating that is? My phone has been ringing all morning. The country club suspended our membership for non-payment, and Harper's private school just sent a final warning about her tuition. Keep your voice down, Kendra. The neighbors can hear you. Trent hissed viciously. The underlying panic in his voice was undeniable. He sounded like a cornered animal. I am handling it. Velocity Logistics is just going through a restructuring phase. I told you to stop spending money like we are billionaires. You told me we were going to be billionaires! Kendra shrieked, the sound of glass shattering, echoing through the audio, likely a thrown wine glass hitting the balcony wall. You promised me this startup was a gold mine. You made me lease that Range Rover. You made me hire a private chef for those stupid networking dinners. And now, we have nothing. We are entirely broke. We are not broke. Trent roared his fist, clearly slamming against a table. I just need liquidity. If your selfish, arrogant bitch of a sister had just signed over that massive lake house, we wouldn't be in this mess. That property is worth millions. I could have collateralized it yesterday and saved the company. Well, she didn't, Kendra cried, her voice breaking into desperate, ugly sobs. She completely humiliated us, Trent. Mom is furious, and now Sienna won't even answer our calls. What are we going to do? If we lose this apartment, I have nowhere to go. I refuse to be poor. I refuse to let people see me fail. You aren't going to fail, and neither am I, Trent replied, his voice dropping to a dark, menacing register that made the hair on my arm stand up. I am not letting a stubborn accountant ruin my life. I have a backup plan. I know a guy from my old fraternity who handles complicated real estate transfers. If Sienna won't give us the house willingly, I'm going to take it from her. I just need a clear photograph of her driver's license to get the paperwork officially stamped. Are you insane? Kendra gasped, though her protest sounded remarkably weak. The terrifying reality was that she was so addicted to her luxury lifestyle, she was willing to overlook a felony. How are you going to get her ID? She locked us out. You are going to help me? Trent demanded coldly. Text her right now. Tell her you and your mother want to apologize. Play the family card. Tell her we want to take her out to dinner to make amends. You just get her to that steakhouse and create a distraction. I will handle the rest. The audio recording clicked off, leaving me sitting in the silence of my car. A cold, dark chuckle escaped my lips. Trent's absolute desperation had completely blinded him to his own monumental stupidity, and Kendra's pathetic greed had made her a willing accomplice to her own destruction. They thought they were hatching a brilliant, clandestine master plan to save their facade, In reality, they were loudly broadcasting their federal conspiracy on a balcony while my investigator recorded every single word. Meanwhile, across town, Trent was operating under a dangerous delusion. He honestly believed his fabricated human resources complaint had neutralized me. But a man drowning in $2 million of toxic debt does not have the luxury of patience. He needed liquid cash immediately, and he knew that simply forcing me out of my own house had failed. He needed a shortcut. As I was leaving the Vanguard office, I received a sudden, unexpected text message from Kendra. It was completely out of character. "Sienna Mom is really upset," the message read. "Trent and I want to apologize for how things escalated yesterday. We are family. Can we please meet for a quick reconciliation dinner tonight at that new steakhouse in Buckhead? We just want to talk and make things right." I stared at the screen, my eyes narrowing. A sudden apology from Kendra was as likely as a blizzard in July. They were terrified that my silence meant I was preparing a lawsuit for the home invasion. Or, more accurately, Trent needed to get me out of my secure house for a specific reason. I knew it was a trap, but avoiding a trap is not how you catch a rat. You have to walk directly into it and let the cage snap shut on their fingers. "I will be there at 8, I replied. I arrived at the steakhouse wearing a sharp, tailored suit. Brenda, Kendra, and Trent were already seated in a dimly lit circular booth near the back. They looked incredibly nervous. Brenda forced a tight, unnatural smile as I slid into the booth opposite them. "Thank you for coming, Sienna," my mother said, her voice shaking slightly. "We just want to put all this ugly business behind us." Before I could even order a glass of water, Kendra reached across the table to grab a bread roll. As she did, her elbow violently knocked over a full glass of red wine. The dark liquid splashed directly onto my expensive silk blazer. "Oh my goodness, I am so incredibly sorry," Kendra gasped, grabbing a handful of napkins and aggressively dabbing at my jacket. "I am so clumsy. You need to go wash that out right now before it sets." The execution of the spill was clumsy, deliberate, and transparent. I looked at Trent, staring intently at the leather handbag I had placed on the empty seat beside me. I understood his objective immediately. He needed something from my purse. "I will be right back," I said, walking toward the restrooms. I did not take my bag with me. I left it sitting perfectly exposed on the leather booth. Let him take whatever he thinks he needs. I knew Trent was stealing my identification to forge a notary stamp. He thought he was clever. He had no idea I was patiently waiting to utterly destroy him. I remained in the leather booth for another 45 minutes, but the dynamic at the table had radically shifted. The suffocating, anxious tension that had gripped Brenda and Kendra when I first arrived was completely gone. In its place was a sickening, bubbling euphoria. They genuinely believed they had just successfully executed the heist of the century against a defenseless, oblivious victim. Trent called the waiter over and aggressively ordered a wildly expensive seafood tower and another bottle of vintage Cabernet, throwing his credit card onto the silver tray with a loud, arrogant slap. He was celebrating. I sat quietly, sipping my cold, sparkling water, watching my family feast on a luxury dinner that Trent's maxed-out credit limit could barely absorb. My mind was operating at 1,000 miles a minute, calculating the exact timeline of his impending destruction. I looked at my mother, Brenda, who was now laughing brightly, praising Trent for his brilliant business mind. I felt a strange, profound sense of detachment. For 33 years, I had craved this woman's validation. I had wanted her to look at my accounting degrees and my real estate portfolio with that exact same look of pride. But sitting across from her now, observing her toast to a man who had just committed identity theft right under her nose, the final illusion of my childhood shattered. These were not my family members anymore. They were hostile liabilities. They were active targets in a federal sting operation that I was personally directing. Kendra was enthusiastically discussing her plans to redecorate their new lake house, talking right over me as if I were already a ghost. I maintained a warm, forgiving smile, playing the role of the naive, beaten-down sister to absolute perfection. Inside, I was experiencing a deeply intoxicating psychological thrill. Trent was sitting less than 3 feet away from me, clutching a digital photograph of my driver's license, feeling like an untouchable king. He was playing a clumsy game of checkers, strictly focused on his next immediate move. He had absolutely no idea I was playing a complex game of three-dimensional chess, and I had already positioned my pieces for a devastating checkmate. My phone vibrated with a calendar alert, reminding me of my early morning strategy meeting at Vanguard Equities. The steakhouse gradually emptied as the evening drew to a close. Trent signed the exorbitant check with a flourish. We all stood up, and Brenda actually had the audacity to pull me into a tight, lingering hug. "I am so glad we fixed things, Sienna," Brenda whispered, patting my back. "Family is everything." "You have no idea," I replied quietly. I walked out into the cool Atlanta night, leaving them on the curb. Driving back to my lake house, my mind seamlessly shifted from the psychological warfare to the physical battlefield. It was time to fortify my fortress. The next morning, I woke up long before dawn. I dressed in a tailored charcoal suit and drove straight to the sleek downtown headquarters of Vanguard Equities. Walking through the glass doors of my own holding company always gave me a quiet sense of absolute triumph. My family firmly believed I was just a salaried accountant, punching a clock for a rigid corporate boss. They had absolutely no idea that a decade ago, I had invested every spare dollar into emerging cryptocurrency markets and distressed commercial real estate. Those early risks had multiplied exponentially, funding this massive private financial empire. I bypassed the front reception desk and took the private glass elevator directly to the executive floor. My legal and acquisition teams were already waiting in the primary boardroom. The documents from yesterday were spread across the polished table. We had initiated the purchase of Trent's toxic debt, but today was about finalizing the aggressive acquisition. I wanted total control over his entire financial footprint. "Good morning," I said, taking my seat at the head of the long table. "I want an immediate status update on the Velocity Logistics portfolio transfer. Have the original lenders executed the final assignment agreements?" My lead acquisitions director, Marcus, nodded confidently. The funds were completely wired at the opening of business today. The 3 private lenders were desperate to offload Trent's defaulted loans. They accepted the premium offer without a single counter-argument. The paperwork is currently being finalized by the federal compliance officers. I smiled very coldly. This was the exact maneuver I needed. "Excellent," I replied, opening my laptop. "I want Vanguard Equities securely positioned as his sole primary creditor. When he inevitably defaults on his Friday payment, I want the foreclosure documents drafted, reviewed, and ready to be filed with the court." My brilliant attorneys nodded in unison, understanding the sheer gravity of my instructions. "We are compiling the asset seizure lists now," Marcus added. "Velocity Logistics has minimal liquid capital, but Trent tied his personal assets to the corporate guarantees. We can legally pursue his vehicles, his frozen bank accounts, and his remaining intellectual property." I leaned back in my leather chair, visualizing the impending destruction of his fragile ego. Trent paraded around Atlanta like a wealthy technology mogul, looking down on a black woman who had quietly purchased his entire miserable existence. He was a spectacular fraud built on leverage. "Keep this acquisition completely confidential," I instructed the room, my voice firm and highly authoritative. "Trent must believe his original lenders are simply giving him a temporary extension. Do not send any formal notices of assignment until I explicitly give the command. I want him feeling exceptionally confident." The room murmured in agreement. I dismissed the team and walked into my private corner office. Looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I surveyed the sprawling Atlanta skyline. I had spent years building Vanguard equities, brick by brick, studying market trends, while my mother mocked my intense dedication to work. Brenda had relentlessly praised Kendra for marrying a white businessman, treating Trent like a royal savior who would elevate our family status. Meanwhile, she treated my accounting career as an embarrassing disappointment. My early cryptocurrency investments had given me the initial capital, but it was my relentless real estate flipping that built this modern fortress. I purchased undervalued commercial properties, renovated them, and leased them to high-paying corporate tenants. The revenue stream was staggering, yet I kept my lifestyle relatively modest. I bought the lake house as a personal sanctuary, completely hiding the true magnitude of my massive wealth. Now the very career my family despised had finally given me the power to dismantle their precious savior. I opened my secure terminal and verified the official transfer records. It was done. I was now legally Trent's biggest shadow creditor. I owned his company. I owned his debt. I held the keys to his entire financial survival. A profound sense of justice washed over me. I had taken his fabricated human resources complaint and used the forced administrative leave to orchestrate his total ruin. He thought suspending my paycheck would starve me out, but it only sharpened my brilliant focus. However, I knew Trent was not simply going to wait for a miracle. He had stolen my identification at the steakhouse for a very specific reason. My private investigator sent a secure message to my phone, confirming my darkest suspicions. Trent had been seen meeting with a disgraced, disbarred notary public late last night. He was not just trying to steal my house through familial guilt anymore. He was actively preparing a darker legal maneuver. He was planning to forge a property transfer document, believing he could easily and illegally leverage my estate to secure a fresh injection of cash. Trent's arrogance was completely blinding him to the massive federal crimes he was about to commit. He thought he could outsmart me, with a fake stamp and a stolen driver's license. He assumed I was too distracted by the corporate sabotage to monitor my own property records. He was about to walk directly into the most devastating trap imaginable. I locked my computer screen and picked up my phone, dialing the direct line for a federal investigator I kept on retainer. "It is time to set the bait," I said quietly. "He is making his final, fatal legal move today." I ended the call with the federal investigator and immediately pulled up the encrypted messaging application on my phone. My private investigator, Elijah, a former state detective who now worked exclusively for Vanguard Equities, was already stationed outside a rundown sports bar on the industrial outskirts of Atlanta. He had been tracking Trent since the moment my brother-in-law left the steakhouse with my stolen identification. Elijah was sending me high-resolution photographs in real time. I watched the digital feed closely as Trent strutted into the establishment, wearing his usual expensive tailored suit that drastically contrasted with the sticky linoleum floors and dim, flickering neon lights of the dive bar. He was completely blinded by his own profound arrogance. He genuinely believed I was sitting at home, crying over my suspended accounting salary, entirely broken and emotionally destroyed. He thought he had successfully neutralized the only threat to his fragile ego. Because he believed I was completely paralyzed by the fabricated corporate sabotage, he decided to bypass any further familial manipulation and take what he wanted by sheer brute force. He walked straight to a back booth and sat down across from a man Elijah had already thoroughly profiled. The man sliding into the booth opposite Trent was Bradley, a former fraternity brother of his, who had been permanently disbarred and stripped of his notary public license 3 years ago for facilitating massive real estate fraud. Through the sophisticated audio surveillance equipment Elijah had discreetly planted near their table, I listened to the entire criminal conspiracy unfold, live from the comfort of my secure home office. Trent ordered a round of cheap beers and leaned across the sticky table. He confidently pulled my stolen Georgia driver's license from his jacket pocket and slid it over to Bradley. He then produced the freshly printed quitclaim deed, the exact same legal document I had shredded in my bedroom just 2 days prior. "She is completely out of the picture," Trent bragged to his disgraced friend, his voice dripping with supreme, unearned white male entitlement. "I got her suspended from her corporate job yesterday. She does not have the liquid funds to hire a decent attorney, let alone fight a drawn-out property dispute in civil court. Once I leverage this lake house and inject the cash into Velocity Logistics, she will be begging me for a place to stay." I listened to his pathetic, delusional monologue with a cold, hollow laugh. Bradley picked up my stolen identification, examined it under the dim bar lighting, and pulled a heavy metal notary stamp from his leather briefcase. "This is going to cost you $10,000 in cash," Trent Bradley muttered. "Forging a federal real estate transfer on a multi-million-dollar property is not a minor favor. If I get caught stamping a fake signature, I am going to federal prison." "You are not going to get caught," Trent scoffed, tossing a thick manila envelope full of $100 bills onto the table. "I told you she is just a pencil pusher who got lucky with a mortgage. She has absolutely no power, no resources, and no fight left in her. Just stamp the document." I watched the live video feed as Bradley greedily counted the cash, pocketed the envelope, and pressed his illegal, fraudulent notary stamp firmly onto the forged signature line. The loud, heavy thud of that metal stamp was the exact sound of Trent digging his own inescapable grave. With that single deliberate action, Trent had officially escalated his pathetic family grievance into a severe, undeniable federal crime. He had committed aggravated identity theft conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery of a real estate instrument. He smugly took the stamped document, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out of the bar, feeling like an absolute conqueror. He genuinely believed he had just legally stolen my 5-bedroom sanctuary. What he failed to comprehend was that stealing a house on paper is completely useless unless you can find a bank willing to give you cash for it. And traditional, highly regulated banking institutions do not lend $2 million to a man with a completely destroyed credit score and a failing tech startup. Trent knew he could not walk into a standard commercial bank with a forged deed. He needed fast, unregulated cash from a shadow lender who would not ask too many difficult questions about his sudden acquisition of a massive lake house. He needed a private, high-risk capital firm that dealt specifically in distressed assets and rapid bridge loans. As I watched Trent drive away from the dive bar, I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus at the Vanguard Equities headquarters. "Trent has the forged deed in his possession," I reported calmly. "He is going to start desperately shopping for a private lender before noon today. He knows traditional banks will instantly flag his ruined credit history." Marcus chuckled softly on the other end of the line. "We are already prepared, Sienna. Our subsidiary lending branch, Apex Capital Solutions, has heavily targeted his online search algorithms since yesterday. When he searches for rapid, high-risk bridge loans in the Atlanta metropolitan area, we are the only viable option that will appear at the top of his feed." I smiled, leaning back and watching the sunrise over the pristine waters of my lake. Trent was about to proudly hand my forged deed directly to my own company, legally cementing his federal wire fraud against a financial institution that I personally controlled. The trap was perfectly set, and he was walking right into the jaws of the beast to his own total destruction. He genuinely believed he was the ultimate mastermind, the entitled architect of my absolute downfall. In reality, He was just a desperate puppet dancing perfectly on the intricate strings I had meticulously woven. When he realized the massive scope of his colossal error, it would be far too late to escape the devastating consequences. The morning after Trent and his clandestine meeting at the sports bar, my personal phone rang. The caller identification displayed my mother calling. I pressed the accept button. "Sienna, please do not hang up on me," Brenda pleaded immediately. Her voice was thick with manufactured tears, trembling with the exact cadence she used whenever she needed to manipulate a situation to her advantage. "I have not slept a single wink since our terrible argument at your house. My heart is completely broken. We are family, Sienna, and family should never fight like this. I cannot bear the thought of losing my daughter over a silly financial misunderstanding." "Trent and Kendra feel absolutely terrible about how things escalated," Brenda continued. "Trent realizes he overstepped his boundaries. He has been under so much pressure with his startup, but he knows he was wrong to demand anything from you. We want to make it right. Please just give us 1 hour of your time. Let us take you out to a nice reconciliation dinner tonight. We booked a table at that new upscale steakhouse in Buckhead. We just want to look you in the eyes and apologize properly." This was the exact trap my private investigator Elijah had warned me about. Trent had acquired the fraudulent notary stamp, but he still needed a physical copy of my official government identification to complete the forgery process without raising red flags at the county clerk office. They needed me out of my secure fortress, distracted and vulnerable. "I will be there at 8 this evening," I replied, my voice projecting a flawless mixture of hesitation and vulnerable hope. "But if Trent raises his voice at me even once, I am walking straight out the door." "Thank you, sweetie," Brenda gasped, dropping the crying act just a fraction too quickly. "We will see you tonight." The hostess guided me to a secluded circular booth near the back of the dining room. Brenda, Kendra, and Trent were already seated, nursing expensive cocktails. They looked incredibly tense. I slid into the curved leather booth directly opposite my sister. I placed my designer handbag carefully on the empty seat beside me, making sure it was within easy reaching distance for the man sitting across the table. "Sienna, thank you so much for coming," Brenda said, reaching out to give my hand a brief, awkward squeeze. "You look lovely." "Let us just get straight to the point," I said, signaling for a waiter and ordering a sparkling water. Cleared his throat, adjusting his expensive silk tie. He leaned forward, cementing a look of profound, fabricated sincerity onto his face. "Sienna, I was way out of line the other day. You have worked incredibly hard for your assets, and I had absolutely no right to demand your lake house. I truly hope you can find it in your heart to forgive my terrible arrogance. We really want to start completely fresh." "I appreciate you saying that, Trent," I replied softly, playing the role of the relieved, naive sister to absolute perfection. The dinner proceeded with excruciatingly forced pleasantries. We ordered appetizers, and Kendra animatedly discussed Harper playing a role at school, attempting to manufacture an atmosphere of warm, familial bonding. As the waiter arrived to clear our starter plates and pour a fresh round of drinks, Kendra dramatically reached across the table to grab a piece of bread from the center basket. As her arm extended, her elbow violently slammed into a full glass of dark Cabernet Sauvignon. The heavy crystal goblet tipped over instantly. A massive wave of dark red wine cascaded directly onto the lap of my tailored beige trousers and splashed across my silk blouse. "Oh my goodness, I am so incredibly sorry," Kendra shrieked, jumping up from the booth and grabbing a handful of white cloth napkins. She began aggressively dabbing at my ruined clothing, creating a chaotic, distracting scene. "I am so clumsy. You need to go to the restroom and wash that out with club soda right now, before it permanently sets into the fabric." The execution of this spill was clumsy, deliberate, and entirely transparent. I looked up and caught Trent staring intensely at the leather handbag I had purposefully left resting on the booth seat. I understood his objective immediately. "It is fine, Kendra," I sighed, standing up and brushing the wet napkins away from my ruined outfit. "I will go clean this up. Please just order my main course while I am gone." I turned and walked toward the restaurant's luxurious restrooms. I deliberately left my purse exposed. I stepped into the brightly lit bathroom, walked over to the marble sink, and simply stared at my reflection in the mirror. I did not even attempt to scrub the wine stain. I slowly counted to 120 in my head, giving Trent exactly 2 minutes to rummage through my belongings, locate my wallet, photograph my identification card, and slide it back into its compartment. When I finally emerged from the restroom and walked back to the dimly lit booth, the tension at the table had completely evaporated. Trent was leaning back comfortably, sipping his drink with a highly satisfied, arrogant smirk plastered across his face. Brenda and Kendra were visibly relaxed, their earlier anxiety entirely replaced by a sickening, triumphant glow. They honestly believed they had just successfully executed a masterful heist against a defenseless, oblivious victim. I reached into my handbag. I immediately noticed the subtle discrepancy. The gold zipper, which I always closed completely to the right side, was now resting slightly misaligned near the middle. Trent had rushed his exit strategy. I pulled my own cell phone out, leaving the zipper exactly as I found it. I looked directly at Trent, offering him a warm, forgiving smile. I played along perfectly, knowing that his stolen photograph was the final piece of evidence I needed to lock him in a federal prison. The following morning dawned with a thick, humid heat that blanketed the city of Atlanta. While I sat comfortably on the deck of my lake house, enjoying a freshly brewed espresso, Trent was already frantically executing the final, fatal stages of his criminal conspiracy. My private investigator, Elijah, provided a continuous stream of real-time updates directly to my secure tablet. Trent had not wasted a single second. Armed with the high-resolution photograph of my driver's license he had stolen during our theatrical dinner, he drove straight back to the dilapidated sports bar to meet his disgraced notary accomplice, Bradley. Inside that dim, sticky booth, Bradley carefully copied my official identification number, my birth date, and the precise formatting of my state-issued license onto the fraudulent property transfer documents. With a heavy, echoing thud of his illegal metal stamp, the forged quitclaim deed was officially completed. Trent handed over the remaining stack of cash, grabbed the thick manila envelope, and walked out into the harsh morning light. He moved with a sickening, swaggering confidence. The sheer magnitude of his unearned white male entitlement practically radiated from his posture. He honestly believed he was an untouchable genius who had just effortlessly outmaneuvered an arrogant, stubborn accountant. His next destination was the county clerk office in downtown Atlanta. Elijah followed him seamlessly through the morning traffic, capturing photographs of Trent striding up the concrete steps of the government building. Inside the sterile, brightly lit municipal office, Trent confidently approached the registration counter. He presented the forged deed to an unsuspecting county clerk. He flashed his signature, charming, practiced smile, likely making some casual, dismissive joke about his generous sister-in-law finally transferring the family property over to his corporate portfolio. The clerk examined the raised notary seal, scanned the seemingly perfect legal formatting, and stamped the official county registration approval onto the top right corner of the document. The transaction was entered into the municipal database. The property, formerly known as my pristine lake house, was now illegally registered under the ownership of Velocity Logistics. Trent walked out of the government building holding the ultimate prize. He had successfully committed a massive federal real estate crime, and he felt absolutely invincible. He pulled out his phone and likely texted Kendra a victorious message, entirely unaware that he had just wrapped a heavy steel chain directly around his own neck. However, possessing a stolen house on a piece of paper meant absolutely nothing if he could not quickly convert that asset into liquid capital. Trent was completely drowning in toxic commercial debt. His servers were on the verge of being shut down, and his impatient investors were demanding immediate financial results. He could not casually stroll into a traditional, highly regulated commercial bank. A standard banking institution would run a comprehensive credit check, heavily scrutinize his failing startup metrics, and require weeks of extensive underwriting before approving a $2 million mortgage. Trent needed fast, unregulated cash, and he needed it today. He required a shadow lender, a private bridge capital firm that specialized in high-risk corporate bailouts, and asked very few questions about the sudden acquisition of a luxury residential estate. He sat inside his expensive vehicle, furiously typing search queries into his mobile browser for rapid commercial liquidity lenders in the metropolitan area. Because my digital marketing team at Vanguard Equities had specifically targeted his unique advertising algorithms over the past 48 hours, only one viable, highly attractive option appeared at the very top of his search results. The advertisement for Apex Capital Solutions promised immediate commercial bridge loans, minimal credit verification, and rapid cash deployment within 24 hours for businesses possessing tangible real estate collateral. It was the exact, miraculous lifeline Trent was desperately praying for. He immediately called the number listed on the sleek professional website. He scheduled an emergency underwriting meeting for that very same afternoon. Trent drove aggressively toward the financial district, completely oblivious to the fact that Apex Capital Solutions was merely a registered subsidiary branch entirely owned and operated by Vanguard Equities. He was driving his luxury vehicle straight into the gaping jaws of my own private financial empire. When Trent walked into the lavish, glass-walled reception area of Apex Capital Solutions, he was greeted by a team of sharp, professional loan officers who had already been explicitly briefed on how to handle his specific arrival. They offered him premium coffee, guided him into a luxurious mahogany boardroom, and treated him with the exact level of corporate reverence his fragile ego so desperately craved. Trent sat at the head of the conference table, exuding supreme arrogance as he slid the freshly registered forged quitclaim deed across the polished wood. He confidently explained to my loan officers that his tech startup was on the verge of a revolutionary industry breakthrough. He smoothly lied that I had willingly gifted him the lake house to support his brilliant entrepreneurial vision. He formally requested a massive $2 million cash injection utilizing the stolen property as his sole source of tangible collateral. My lending officers nodded respectfully, validating his delusional grandeur while systematically collecting his fraudulent signatures on dozens of federal loan application documents. They meticulously recorded his banking routing numbers and officially verified the forged county deed. Trent eagerly signed his name on every single dotted line, completely blinding himself to the catastrophic reality of his actions. He was legally binding himself to a massive federal wire fraud conspiracy against a highly protected financial entity. He thought he had brilliantly outsmarted the stubborn, arrogant CPA, who steadfastly refused to bend the knee to his endless demands. He believed he had won the family war. He stood up, shook hands with the lending directors, and strutted out of the building feeling like an absolute conqueror. As he took the elevator down to the grand lobby, my lead underwriter scanned the completed fraudulent loan packet and sent it directly to my secure server. The encrypted notification chimed softly, slicing through the quiet hum of my executive office. I set down my pen and leaned forward, clicking open the secure digital portal. My lead underwriter, David, had just transmitted the complete, unredacted file from the Apex Capital Solutions boardroom. I opened the high-resolution scan of the loan application and stared directly at the ultimate proof of my brother-in-law's catastrophic stupidity. There it was, displayed brilliantly across my high-definition monitor. The quitclaim deed for my 5-bedroom lake house. It featured my forged signature complete with the heavy dark ink of Bradley's illegal notary stamp and the official municipal registration seal from the county clerk. Trent had actually done it. He had walked into a commercial lending firm, presented stolen real estate as collateral, and formally requested a $2 million cash injection. I scrolled through the accompanying federal loan documents he had signed. Trent had initialed every single page, explicitly guaranteeing the authenticity of the property transfer, under the penalty of perjury. He had provided his banking routing numbers, his tax identification, and a fabricated narrative detailing how I had supposedly gifted him the property. He genuinely believed he was dealing with a faceless, predatory shadow lender who would simply glance at the paperwork and hand over a mountain of cash. He had absolutely no idea that Apex Capital Solutions was a direct, wholly owned subsidiary of Vanguard Equities. He did not know that the very woman he had insulted, threatened, and tried to rob was sitting in a corner office just 3 miles away, personally reviewing every single lie he had just put into writing. I picked up my phone and dialed David's direct extension. He answered immediately, his voice professional, but laced with an undercurrent of shock. "Sienna, the application is fully executed. He signed the personal guarantee and the asset pledge. The forged deed has been verified through the county database. He is officially requesting the $2 million wire transfer to be deposited directly into the primary operating account for Velocity Logistics. How do you wish to proceed with this?" I looked at the digital signature on the screen, marveling at the sheer arrogance of a man who thought his privilege made him invincible. He thought he could steal from a black woman and simply walk away without a single consequence. "Approve the loan, David," I instructed, my voice deadly calm and steady. "Process the underwriting approval right now and prepare the wire transfer for immediate deployment." David hesitated for a second. "Sienna, if we wire those funds, we are officially executing a fraudulent transaction. Are you absolutely certain you want to release $2 million of our liquid capital to a man who is actively committing a federal crime against this institution?" "I am not losing $2 million, David," I clarified, a cold, satisfied smile spreading across my face. "I am buying a federal indictment. When he accepts that wire transfer across state lines, he elevates a simple state-level forgery into a massive federal offense. I want him to take the money. I want him to spend it. I want him to feel so powerful and untouchable that he drops his guard." David understood the strategy perfectly. "Initiating the final approval sequence now. The funds will be routed through the Federal Reserve System and deposited into his corporate account within the next 20 minutes. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Trent had just handed me the ultimate weapon. By submitting that forged document to a registered financial subsidiary, he had committed severe bank fraud. By accepting the cash across digital banking networks, he was committing felony wire fraud. These were not minor civil disputes that could be settled in a local mediation room. These were catastrophic federal crimes that carried mandatory minimum prison sentences. He had destroyed his own life, and he was currently driving through Atlanta traffic feeling like a king. My personal cell phone vibrated on the desk. It was a text message from my mother, Brenda. I picked it up and read the brief, manipulative words. "Sienna, we are so worried about you. You have not answered any of our calls since the reconciliation dinner. Please reach out to us. We just want our family to be whole again." I scoffed, tossing the phone back onto the desk without typing a single word in response. They did not want their family to be whole. They wanted me to be silent, compliant, and broken. They wanted me to surrender my hard-earned assets so Trent could continue playing the role of a successful tech entrepreneur. They had no idea that their precious golden boy had just walked directly into a federal trap that would annihilate their existence. My office computer chimed again, signaling a confirmed transaction. The wire transfer had been processed and accepted by the receiving bank. $2 million had just landed inside the Velocity Logistics corporate checking account. Trent had the money. The trap had snapped shut, its steel teeth sinking into his arrogant flesh. I opened a new secure folder on my desktop and began compiling the evidence. I dragged the forged deed, the signed loan applications, the surveillance photos of his meeting with the disgraced notary, and the federal wire transfer confirmation logs into a single dossier. I named the folder with his full legal name. Trent had spent the last week trying to humiliate me, sabotage my corporate accounting career, and steal my sanctuary. He thought his entitlement would crush me. Instead, he had just committed felony wire fraud and bank fraud against a federal entity, handing me the ultimate weapon to destroy him. He was completely unaware that every digital footprint was permanently logged onto my private secure server. He thought the money made him untouchable. Now, with the stolen cash padding his ego, I knew he was preparing to physically breach my home once again. I was not about to leave the physical security of my estate to chance. Trent fancied himself a highly intelligent technology entrepreneur. While his actual coding skills were completely atrocious, he knew enough about digital infrastructure to understand that standard, commercially available smart home systems operated on vulnerable Wi-Fi frequencies. He would undoubtedly attempt to jam my commercial security system to cover his tracks during the invasion. I was not going to simply let him kick my door down. I was going to turn my 5-bedroom sanctuary into an inescapable federal soundstage. Late that evening, a completely unmarked black van pulled into my driveway. I had contracted an elite private security firm comprised of former military intelligence technicians. They did not wear branded uniforms, and they worked in absolute silence. I handed the lead engineer a blueprint of my house and a blank check. "I need a secondary, completely air-gapped surveillance network," I instructed, walking him through the expansive living room and out onto the back deck. "I anticipate a perimeter breach and a localized Wi-Fi jamming attack within the next 48 hours. The commercial cameras visible on the porches can be sacrificed as decoys. I need hidden, hardwired optics covering every square inch of the entryway, the living room, and the outdoor patio. And I want the audio fidelity sharp enough to pick up a whisper." For the next 10 hours, the technicians systematically dissected the architecture of my home. They ran miles of microfiber optic cables behind the drywall, completely independent of my home's primary internet grid. They installed microscopic high-definition 4K lenses directly into the intricate crown molding above my fireplace, behind the tinted glass of my custom kitchen cabinetry, and inside the external smoke detectors on the back patio. The entire closed-circuit system was routed down into the foundation of the house, feeding into a military-grade encrypted DVR server locked inside a fireproof titanium wall safe. The system ran on a dedicated cellular uplink and an independent heavy-duty battery matrix. Even if Trent somehow managed to cut the municipal power lines to the entire neighborhood, my house would continue recording his felonies in brilliant high-definition color. By dawn, the technicians had vanished, leaving absolutely no trace of their extensive work. The house looked exactly as it had the day before. The pristine hardwood floors gleamed, and the expensive artwork hung quietly on the walls. But the estate was now a living, breathing trap. I had essentially transformed my private sanctuary into a highly sophisticated digital spiderweb. All I had to do now was wait for the flies to willingly march through the front door. The anticipation hummed through my veins like a live electrical wire. 2 days after he accepted the fraudulent transfer, my smartphone vibrated aggressively across my mahogany desk. A stark red notification banner flashed across the screen from my smart home security application. The main perimeter cameras, the smart locks, and the motion sensors at my lake house had all been simultaneously disconnected from the main network. Trent used his stolen funds to hire a local cybersecurity contractor to jam my external wireless signals, blinding my primary defense grid. He honestly believed he was executing a flawless home invasion. He thought he was severing my visual connection to my property, leaving me entirely blind and powerless in Atlanta while he conquered my sanctuary. I did not panic. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk, pulled out a secondary encrypted tablet, and entered a 12-digit alphanumeric passcode. When I purchased the massive estate, I hired a private security firm to hardwire a completely independent, closed-circuit camera network, seamlessly hidden directly into the architectural molding. This backup system ran on its own isolated cellular server and an independent battery supply. The pristine, high-definition video feed immediately flickered to life on my tablet screen. The brilliant afternoon sun reflected off the surface of Lake Oconee, illuminating the front driveway. A white commercial locksmith van was parked directly behind Trent's luxury sports utility vehicle. Trent, Kendra, and Brenda were standing triumphantly on my front porch. Trent waved the forged, highly illegal quitclaim deed right in the face of an uncomfortable-looking locksmith. I turned up the audio feed, listening to the clear sound of Trent's profound, white male entitlement. "The house legally belongs to my corporation now," Trent stated loudly, tapping the fraudulent county registration seal on the paper. "My sister-in-law was recently evicted due to severe financial distress. I need you to drill through this deadbolt immediately so we can begin moving our family into our new property." The locksmith, seeing an official county stamp and a wealthy-looking white man in a tailored suit, did not ask any further questions. He pulled out a heavy industrial drill and completely destroyed the expensive brass locking mechanism on my solid oak front door. The heavy door swung open, and the three of them marched inside my home like conquering royalty. "It is completely ours now," Kendra squealed, walking directly into my expansive living room and dropping her designer handbag onto my custom leather sofa. "I told you she would not have the money to fight us in court. She is probably packing her cheap clothes into a tiny apartment right now." Brenda walked behind her, running her hands over my expensive granite countertops with a look of absolute greed. "This is exactly what Sienna deserves," my mother announced, her voice dripping with vindictive satisfaction. "She refused to help this family when we needed her most. Now we have a beautiful estate, and Trent finally has the quiet space he needs to run his technology empire." Trent did not waste a single moment admiring the architecture. He immediately began barking orders. "We need to clear out all of her cheap garbage before the weekend," Trent commanded, waving his arms around my meticulously decorated living room. "I am hosting a massive housewarming and business relaunch party this Saturday. I want all of her artwork, her furniture, and her personal belongings shoved directly into the garage. We will hire a junk removal service to haul it away next week." I watched in silent, simmering fury as Trent walked over to a custom oil painting created by a renowned black artist that I had purchased for $30,000. He casually ripped the canvas off the wall and dropped it face down onto the hardwood floor. Kendra immediately joined in grabbing my expensive crystal vases and tossing them into cardboard boxes like they were worthless trash. They were desecrating my sanctuary, utterly confident that their victory was completely absolute. They honestly thought they had defeated me. They believed that because I was a black woman who had temporarily lost my corporate accounting salary, I was completely powerless to stop a wealthy white man armed with a stamped legal document. I reached for my desk phone, picked up the receiver, and dialed a direct, unlisted telephone number for the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office in Atlanta. "Special Agent Harrison, this is Sienna," I said, my voice projecting absolute, deadly calm. "I am currently watching a live video feed of a coordinated home invasion at my private estate on Lake Oconee. The perpetrators have utilized a forged, fraudulently notarized property deed to bypass a commercial locksmith and gain a legal entry. They are actively destroying highly valuable personal property. Do you want me to dispatch the local county sheriff to clear the premises, Sienna? Special Agent Harrison asked, the sound of rapid typing echoing through the telephone receiver. No, I replied, a cold, dangerous smile spreading across my face. A simple trespassing charge is not sufficient for the crimes they have committed today. The man currently destroying my living room is Trent Sterling. He used that exact same forged deed to secure a $2 million commercial loan from a financial institution yesterday. He committed felony wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. I have the financial paper trail. Special Agent Harrison paused, immediately recognizing the massive severity of the federal crimes I had just outlined. You have documented proof of a federal wire fraud conspiracy? I have the entire criminal enterprise wrapped up in a perfect digital bow, I confirmed, gripping my phone tightly. They are hosting a massive, arrogant celebration party at my lake house this Saturday afternoon. They have invited their entire extended family to celebrate my supposed financial ruin. I want you to coordinate a full tactical raid with the local authorities. We are going to publicly arrest every single one of them in front of absolutely everyone they know. By Saturday afternoon, the thick, humid Georgia heat had given way to a perfectly clear, breezy weekend. I sat in the quiet, air-conditioned sanctuary of my Vanguard Equities corner office, staring intently at the high-definition monitor on my desk. The hidden independent camera network I had installed at the lake house was broadcasting a live, crystal-clear feed of the absolute desecration of my property. Trent and Kendra were not merely moving their boxes into my home. They were hosting a massive, lavish event. They had aggressively dubbed it their official housewarming and business relaunch party. I watched in cold, calculating silence as a fleet of expensive catering vans pulled directly onto my pristine, crushed stone driveway. Men in crisp white shirts carried silver trays of hors d'oeuvres and massive floral arrangements through my front doors, completely bypassing the shattered deadbolt. Trent had wasted absolutely no time utilizing a portion of his newly acquired, highly illegal loan. He had hired a professional event planning staff to transform my expansive backyard deck and private dock into a high society networking gala. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of spending stolen federal funds to celebrate a fraudulent real estate acquisition on the exact premises he had just burglarized was genuinely staggering. As the afternoon progressed, the guest list began to arrive. I immediately recognized the luxury vehicles pulling onto my lawn. These were not just Trent's dubious tech connections and desperate angel investors. This was my own flesh and blood. My extended family, the very same people who had flooded my phone with vicious, hateful text messages, calling me a corporate sellout and a greedy elitist, were now happily stepping out of their cars to enjoy the spoils of my supposed destruction. I zoomed in on the camera positioned near the outdoor wet bar. My Aunt Valerie, who had left me a scathing voicemail just 4 days ago, was laughing loudly while sipping top-shelf champagne that she undoubtedly believed Trent had purchased. My cousin David, the man who had weaponized our cultural solidarity to defend my white brother-in-law, was vigorously shaking Trent's hand and slapping him on the back with profound admiration. They were all wearing their Sunday best, eagerly swarming my backyard, completely blinded by the illusion of Trent's manufactured wealth. Brenda was in her absolute element. My mother floated through the crowd of relatives, wearing a brand new silk dress, acting as the supreme matriarch of the estate. She held a crystal flute of sparkling wine, holding court near the edge of my infinity pool. I turned up the highly sensitive audio feed, listening perfectly as she blatantly lied to my aunts and uncles. Sienna simply could not afford the mortgage payments anymore. Brenda lied smoothly, her voice dripping with artificial maternal pity. She lost her corporate accounting job, and the bank was threatening immediate foreclosure. Thankfully, Trent stepped in and took over the property just in time. He practically saved her from total financial ruin. We had to push her a little bit to accept his help, but this house is finally back where it belongs, serving the real family. I clenched my jaw, my fingernails digging deeply into the leather armrests of my executive chair. The ease with which she fabricated a narrative to protect her golden child's husband while entirely erasing my decade of relentless hard work was sickening. She was actively reveling in my perceived downfall, completely thriving on the false reality that I had failed and Trent had conquered. Kendra was equally insufferable. She strutted across the wooden deck in a highly expensive designer sundress, dragging my young niece Harper from guest to guest. Kendra was aggressively pointing out the architectural details of my home, taking direct credit for the custom landscaping and the expensive outdoor lighting fixtures I had personally commissioned last year. She was playing the role of the triumphant, wealthy housewife, completely ignoring the fact that her entire existence was currently balanced on the edge of a massive federal criminal indictment. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the caterers began pouring fresh rounds of champagne for the 50 guests gathered on the sprawling back deck. Trent stepped up onto the raised platform near the outdoor fireplace. He grabbed a silver spoon and clinked it loudly against the side of his crystal glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the ambient music and the loud chatter of my extended family. The crowd immediately quieted down, turning their eager attention toward the man of the hour. "Family, friends, and esteemed colleagues," Trent began, his voice booming with supreme unearned arrogance. He stood tall in his tailored linen suit, projecting the absolute image of a victorious tech mogul. "I want to thank every single one of you for coming out to the lake today to celebrate this massive milestone. As many of you know, building a revolutionary digital logistics empire is not for the faint of heart. The business world is brutal, and there are always people who want to see you fail. There are always selfish, small-minded individuals who try to stand in the way of progress and family wealth." He paused, letting his thinly veiled insult toward me hang heavy in the humid Georgia air. Brenda nodded in vigorous agreement from the front row of the crowd. Aunt Valerie actually raised her glass in a gesture of solidarity. "But we do not let obstacles stop us," Trent continued, his voice rising with passionate, theatrical bravado. "When the market pushes back, we push back harder. When someone tries to block our path to success, we step right over them and we take exactly what belongs to us. We secured a massive round of funding this week, and we officially added this beautiful estate to the Velocity Logistics corporate portfolio. To new beginnings, to overcoming adversity, and to the unbreakable bonds of this family." Cousin David shouted enthusiastically, and the crowd cheered loudly. Right now, I watched the pathetic display of fake wealth and stolen glory on my monitor for exactly 1 more minute. The raucous cheering of my extended family echoed through my computer speakers, a sickening symphony of blind loyalty and unearned entitlement. I reached forward and firmly pressed the power button, plunging the screen into total darkness. I grabbed my thick leather briefcase, locked my executive office, and took the private elevator down to the underground parking garage. I drove straight to the Greene County Sheriff's Department. Inside the briefing room, I unlocked my briefcase and slid the meticulously organized binders of evidence across the table to Special Agent Harrison. I showed him the forged deed, the digital sabotage logs, and the live video feed of the ongoing home invasion. The federal agents took one look at the airtight evidence and immediately geared up for a full tactical raid. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the sheriff department and walked out into the blinding Georgia heat, flanked by the very federal agents who were about to dismantle Trent's entire fraudulent reality. We climbed into a fleet of unmarked black sport utility vehicles. The ride back to my lake house was silent, tense, and absolutely thrilling. My heart drummed a steady, powerful rhythm against my ribs. There was no anxiety left in my system. I was a woman executing a flawless, legally binding counterattack. As our convoy turned onto the private dirt road leading to my secluded estate, the distant thumping bass of expensive outdoor speakers vibrated through the floorboards of our vehicle. Agent Harrison signaled for the local deputies to kill their sirens. They parked the cruisers silently, just out of sight, blocking the single exit route from my driveway. Nobody was leaving this property until I was completely finished with them. I stepped out of the federal vehicle, straightening the lapels of my tailored designer suit. The contrast between my sharp professional armor and the arrogant, stolen luxury occurring in my backyard was profound. I walked down the crushed gravel pathway toward the side gate of my backyard. Agent Harrison and his heavily armed tactical team fanned out, slipping silently into the lush privacy hedges that supported my property. They waited in the shadows, entirely invisible, waiting for my signal. I pushed the wooden side gate open and stepped into the sprawling, sunlit backyard. The scene before me was a sickening display of profound, unearned entitlement. Trent had hired a massive catering crew, complete with tuxedoed waiters carrying silver trays of imported caviar and crystal flutes of my stolen vintage champagne. Over 50 members of my extended family were gathered around the infinity pool. These were the exact same aunts, uncles, and cousins who had flooded my phone with vicious, hateful text messages, calling me a selfish elitist for refusing to subsidize my white brother-in-law's failing tech startup. Now they were happily eating my food and drinking my wine, completely blinded by the illusion of his manufactured wealth. My mother, Brenda, floated through the crowd in an obnoxious floral sundress, laughing loudly and accepting compliments on her daughter's beautiful new home. Kendra stood nearby, preening like a triumphant queen as she showed off the custom outdoor kitchen I had personally designed and paid for last summer. Then I saw Trent. He was standing on the elevated stone patio overlooking the water, clutching a microphone connected to the massive audio system. He wore a crisp linen suit, sweating slightly in the humidity, radiating the supreme confidence of a man who believed he had successfully stolen a multi-million-dollar estate from a black woman without a single consequence. I crossed my arms and listened to his sickening, arrogant speech echoing across the water. "Family and friends!" Trent bellowed into the microphone, flashing a bright, predatory smile. "Thank you for coming out to celebrate this massive milestone for Velocity Logistics and for our growing family. As you know, the business world is incredibly brutal. Sometimes you face unexpected obstacles. Sometimes certain selfish individuals try to stand in the way of progress and block you from taking what rightfully belongs to you. But we do not let small-minded people stop our vision." The crowd of my own blood relatives actually clapped at his thinly veiled insult directed at me. Brenda raised her champagne glass high in the air, cheering the loudest. I refused to let this pathetic, delusional spectacle continue for another second. I marched directly over to the main outdoor electrical panel located near the pool house. I firmly gripped the thick primary power cable and yanked it straight out of the socket. The loud thumping music and Trent's amplified, arrogant voice cut out instantly. A sudden, deafening silence fell over the entire backyard. 50 pairs of eyes snapped toward the pool house. The collective gasp from my extended family was distinctly audible. Cousin David froze with a cocktail halfway to his mouth. Aunt Valerie nearly dropped her expensive plate. I stepped out from the shade of the pool house and walked directly into the center of the patio, my heels clicking sharply against the stone. Brenda was the first person to break from the frozen, shocked crowd. My mother marched right up to me, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She pointed a manicured finger aggressively at my chest. "What on earth do you think you are doing here, Sienna?" Brenda screamed, her voice shaking with rage. "You have absolutely no right to show your face today. You abandoned this family when we needed you. Now turn around and leave Trent and Kendra's property right this second before you ruin this beautiful celebration." Trent pushed his way past my mother, his face flushed red with indignation. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded, heavy piece of paper. He smugly waved the forged quitclaim deed right in my face, shaking it like a victorious flag. "You are completely delusional, Sienna," Trent sneered, stepping entirely too close. "You do not own a single square inch of this estate anymore. The county clerk registered this legal transfer this morning. My corporation legally owns this house. You are the one who is trespassing. You are bitter, you are broke, and you are currently ruining my business launch. I am giving you exactly 30 seconds to walk your arrogant attitude off my lawn. If you do not leave immediately, I am going to call the cops and have you dragged out of here in handcuffs." I stood my ground, completely refusing to blink or retreat a single inch, and offered him a deeply cold, highly lethal smile that made his arrogant blue eyes widen in sudden, unexpected fear. "There is absolutely no need to call them Trent," I replied evenly, my steady voice cutting like glass. "I brought them with me." The heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around Trent's wrists, producing a sharp, metallic sound that echoed across the stunned silence of the backyard patio. Two heavily armored federal agents gripped his shoulders, hauling him up from the stone floor where his arrogant facade had just crumbled. His expensive linen suit was wrinkled and stained with sweat, a reflection of his destroyed empire. He did not scream or fight as they marched him toward the waiting line of black federal vehicles parked in my driveway. The sheer magnitude of his financial ruin had paralyzed him. He was facing decades in federal prison, stripped of his stolen wealth, his company, and his unearned pride. I turned my attention away from the disgraced mogul and focused on the remaining crowd of party guests. The 50 members of my extended family were absolutely frozen in place. These were the exact same people who had aggressively flooded my phone with vicious messages, calling me a greedy elitist. Now their champagne flutes trembled in their hands. My Aunt Valerie covered her mouth with her palm, her eyes darting nervously between the federal agents and my sharp-tailored suit. Cousin David took a cowardly step backward, trying to blend invisibly into the privacy hedges. The intoxicating illusion of Trent's manufactured wealth had evaporated, leaving them standing in the harsh sunlight of reality. They finally understood that they had eagerly cheered for a federal criminal while relentlessly vilifying the only successful independent woman in our entire family. Kendra was the first to break the heavy silence. She let out a piercing shriek, dropping her designer handbag directly onto the wet concrete surrounding the infinity pool. Her carefully constructed image as the wealthy Buckhead housewife shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She lunged forward, desperately trying to follow the federal agents who were stuffing her husband into the back of a squad car. A local sheriff deputy stepped into her path, holding up a firm hand to block her advance. Kendra stumbled backward, her chest heaving with frantic panic. She spun around wildly, her tear-streaked face searching the crowd for a savior. Her eyes locked onto our mother, and she practically sprinted across the deck, burying her face into Brenda's shoulder. Brenda stood completely paralyzed, watching the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers reflecting off my pristine lake. The supreme matriarch of the family, the woman who had proudly orchestrated this hostile takeover, was suddenly realizing the catastrophic severity of her own actions. She had knowingly participated in a massive federal conspiracy. She had broken into my private sanctuary and attempted to steal my highly valuable personal property. She was no longer a respected church elder or a proud mother. She was an active accomplice to a wire fraud scheme, and the authorities were currently swarming her stolen kingdom. Brenda's survival instincts kicked in with ruthless, manipulative precision. She violently shoved Kendra away, physically distancing herself from the wife of a newly minted federal felon. Brenda smoothed down the front of her expensive floral sundress and took a slow, calculated step toward me. The vicious, authoritative scowl she had worn just 10 minutes ago was entirely gone. In its place, she plastered on a mask of profound, manufactured maternal grief. Giant crocodile tears instantly welled up in her eyes, spilling over her perfectly applied makeup and tracking down her cheeks. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest, assuming the posture of a tragic, completely innocent victim who had been horribly deceived by a wicked son-in-law. "Sienna, my beautiful daughter," Brenda sobbed, her voice trembling with a sickening, artificial desperation. She took another step forward, reaching out her hands as if she wanted to pull me into a warm, loving embrace. "You have to believe me. We had absolutely no idea what Trent was doing. He lied to us. He manipulated this entire family. He told us that you had willingly signed the house over to him because you were moving out of the state. He completely tricked us into coming here today. We are just innocent victims in his terrible scheme. Please, Sienna, you have to protect us from these federal agents." I did not move a single inch. I stood my ground, staring at her outstretched hands with absolute ice. "Do not take another step toward me," I commanded my voice, projecting a lethal authority that stopped her dead in her tracks. "Sienna, please," Brenda begged, her fake tears flowing faster as she realized her manipulation was completely failing. "We are your family. We are your own flesh and blood. You cannot let them arrest your mother and your sister. We made mistakes, but we always loved you. We need to stick together and show family loyalty. I will do whatever you want. Just tell these agents to let us go." I looked at the woman who had spent my entire life prioritizing a mediocre white man over my rigorous, independent success. I thought about the decades of emotional coldness, the endless comparisons to my golden child sister, and the cruel ultimatum she had delivered right inside my master bedroom. She honestly believed that a few fake tears and a desperate plea for family loyalty could erase her deliberate, malicious betrayal. "You stood in my bedroom and demanded that I sign over the only sanctuary I have ever owned," I stated, my words cutting through the humid air with devastating clarity. "You explicitly told me to sign this house over to that federal criminal, or I was no longer your daughter. You made your choice with absolute certainty, Brenda." "I was just angry," Brenda cried, her voice pitching into a high, pathetic whine. "I did not mean it." "I meant it," I replied coldly, delivering the final crushing blow. "I am just keeping my end of the bargain. You are not my mother. You are an active participant in a federal burglary, and we are nothing to each other." Brenda collapsed onto the hard stone patio, her entire body shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. The pristine maternal facade she had weaponized against me for over 3 decades completely disintegrated in front of the entire crowd. Special Agent Harrison did not offer her a single ounce of sympathy. He turned his sharp gaze toward the local county sheriff deputies standing by the edge of my infinity pool. "Take them off this property right now," Agent Harrison commanded, his voice projecting absolute, unyielding federal authority. "Process them for criminal trespassing, the destruction of private property, and accessory to federal wire fraud." 2 heavily armored deputies immediately marched forward. They grabbed Brenda by the arms, hauling her up from the wet concrete. My mother shrieked, desperately digging the heels of her expensive shoes into the ground, but the deputies effortlessly dragged her toward the side gate. Kendra let out a piercing, hysterical scream as a female deputy firmly gripped her wrists. "You cannot do this to me!" Kendra wailed, thrashing wildly against the officer. "I am a respectable mother." "You are making a massive mistake. The only mistake you made was breaking into a federal informant's private estate," the deputy replied coldly. I stood perfectly still on my expansive wooden deck, watching the local law enforcement officers march my mother and my sister across the lush green lawn. They were publicly paraded right past the massive catering tents and the towering floral arrangements they had so arrogantly purchased with stolen money. The sheer absolute humiliation of their perp walk was breathtaking to witness. They had orchestrated this lavish celebration to flaunt their unearned victory, and now they were being escorted off my estate like common street criminals. Down the crushed gravel driveway, Trent was completely losing his mind in strict federal custody. Two large federal agents were forcefully shoving him into the back of a heavily reinforced government vehicle. His expensive, tailored linen suit was torn at the shoulder, stained with sweat and dirt. Trent violently kicked the metal doorframe of the vehicle, his face contorting into a mask of pure, desperate rage. "I still have the $2 million in cash!" Trent screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing frantically across the serene lake. "I will hire the most ruthless corporate defense lawyers in the entire state of Georgia. You are going to pay for this, Sienna." I walked slowly down the front steps of my porch, stopping just a few feet away from the federal vehicle. I looked directly through the heavy glass window, meeting his wild, furious blue eyes. "You do not have a single dime, Trent," I stated, my voice slicing through his pathetic tantrum with surgical precision. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of Vanguard Equities. Not only did you commit felony bank fraud by illegally taking my money, but my holding company also purchased all of your previous defaulted commercial loans this morning. I completely own your entire failing, fraudulent technology startup. I own your massive corporate debt. I own the very loan you just used to commit a massive federal crime. You are financially erased." Trent immediately stopped kicking the door. The color instantly drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly pale white. His arrogant, untouchable white male facade completely shattered in a fraction of a second. He fell to his knees inside the cramped back seat of the federal cruiser, the heavy steel handcuffs clinking loudly against the plastic barrier. He finally realized that he was not facing a simple civil dispute over a small family property anymore. He was facing 10 to 15 years in a federal penitentiary, and he possessed absolutely zero resources to defend himself. Agent Harrison slammed the heavy vehicle doors shut, permanently sealing Trent inside his self-made prison. I turned my attention back toward the backyard patio. The 50 members of my extended family were in a state of absolute chaotic panic. These were the exact same aunts, uncles, and cousins who had flooded my personal phone with vicious, hateful, cruel text messages. Now they were frantically dropping their crystal champagne flutes and abandoning their expensive gourmet appetizers on the stone patio. Aunt Valerie practically sprinted across the perfectly manicured lawn, her expensive heels sinking deeply into the soft, muddy dirt. Cousin David, who had boldly defended Trent just an hour ago, aggressively shoved his own wife out of the way to reach his white luxury sedan faster. They scrambled toward their vehicles like terrified rats fleeing a sinking ship. They realized they had gladly eaten stolen food, drank stolen wine, and enthusiastically cheered for a man who was now facing decades in federal prison. They were absolutely terrified that the federal agents would suddenly start interrogating them as active, willing conspirators. Engines roared to life all across my sprawling green front lawn. Tires squealed loudly against the crushed stone driveway as they aggressively peeled out, desperate to escape the impending catastrophic fallout. They abandoned Brenda and Kendra without a single backward glance, proving that their supposed family loyalty was nothing but a fragile, self-serving illusion. Within 15 minutes, my property was completely cleared of their toxic presence. A heavy-duty federal tow truck arrived at the end of the driveway, hooking up Trent's obnoxiously expensive sports utility vehicle. They hauled his car away to be processed as physical criminal evidence. Special Agent Harrison walked directly over to me holding a thick black legal clipboard. "My tactical team has fully secured the perimeter of your estate, Ms. Hayes," Agent Harrison reported professionally. We have formally logged the stolen artwork and the custom furniture they attempted to move into your garage. We have everything we need to secure a grand jury indictment by Monday morning. Trent Sterling will not see the outside of a federal holding cell for a very long time.
What about my mother and my sister? I asked, looking out at the calm, shimmering water of the beautiful lake.
Agent Harrison followed my gaze toward the rippling water, adjusting his tactical vest before answering my question. They are being transported to the Greene County Detention Center right now, he stated, with absolute professional detachment. Given their direct active participation in a coordinated federal burglary and their attempt to fence stolen property, the district attorney is formally charging both of them with felony criminal trespassing and accessory to wire fraud. They will have a bail hearing on Monday morning, but considering the sheer magnitude of the financial crimes involved, the judge will not make it cheap. I nodded slowly, absorbing the profound, heavy reality of his words. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I had warned them. I had given them every conceivable opportunity to simply walk away and leave me alone. Instead, they had chosen to aggressively conquer my sanctuary. I thanked Agent Harrison for his swift, decisive action. He tipped his head, respectfully turned around, and walked up the gravel driveway to join the remaining local deputies. I stood perfectly still on the edge of my sprawling wooden deck, listening to the powerful engines of the federal vehicles fading off into the distance. The toxic, suffocating weight of my entitled family had finally been completely eradicated from my life. The following 8 months delivered a relentless, highly publicized cascade of devastating consequences for everyone who had attempted to destroy my independent existence. Trent never even made it to a federal jury trial. The overwhelming mountain of digital evidence, combined with the heavily documented fraudulent loan applications he had eagerly signed at my own financial subsidiary, made any legal defense entirely impossible. His expensive corporate attorneys quickly advised him to accept a comprehensive plea deal. Standing in a federal courtroom in downtown Atlanta, stripped of his tailored linen suits and his arrogant white male privilege, Trent pleaded guilty to felony bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. The federal judge showed absolutely no leniency for his white-collar crimes. Trent was sentenced to 12 brutal years in a federal penitentiary. Furthermore, Vanguard Equities officially executed the aggressive foreclosure on his toxic business debt. I personally oversaw the rapid, total liquidation of Velocity Logistics. We legally seized every single remaining asset he possessed, permanently wiping his manufactured technology empire off the face of the earth. He was financially and socially annihilated. Kendra faced an equally spectacular, profoundly humiliating downfall. Without Trent's fabricated corporate income to subsidize her lavish buckhead lifestyle, and with her personal bank accounts completely frozen by aggressive federal investigators, she was swiftly evicted from her temporary luxury apartment. The designer handbags and leased luxury vehicles she constantly used to project an image of supreme superiority were all aggressively repossessed by angry creditors. She was forced to move into a tiny, dilapidated one-bedroom apartment on the industrial outskirts of the city. Today, the former golden child of our family works 2 grueling minimum-wage retail jobs just to keep the electricity running, while desperately navigating a highly publicized, incredibly messy divorce. She lost her husband, her stolen wealth, and her unearned pride in a single afternoon. The generational empire she had arrogantly bragged about building for her daughter simply vanished into thin air. Brenda experienced a completely different, yet equally devastating kind of total destruction. My mother managed to narrowly avoid serving time in a federal prison by immediately turning on Trent and aggressively cooperating with the federal prosecutors. However, the social and financial fallout of her malicious choices was absolute. She was forced to drain her entire retirement savings and take out a massive second mortgage on her own house just to pay her exorbitant criminal defense attorneys.
The prestigious, tight-knit church community in Atlanta formally excommunicated her, completely appalled by the public revelation of her crimes. The gossiping elite social circles she had spent decades desperately trying to impress shunned her entirely. She was universally recognized as a toxic, greedy woman who had actively helped an entitled white man attempt to steal a multi-million-dollar estate from her own highly successful black daughter. She became an absolute pariah, living in total miserable isolation. Meanwhile, my own vindication was not merely a quiet, personal victory. It was a loud, flawless corporate ascension. The federal investigation quickly exposed the fabricated human resources complaints Trent had maliciously submitted to my corporate accounting firm. Once my name was officially cleared and Trent's digital sabotage was entered into the federal public record, the senior partners at my firm panicked. They called me into a private executive boardroom, sweating through their expensive suits as they offered a series of profound, desperate apologies. They practically begged me to return to my position, sliding a contract across the table that included a massive promotion to senior director and a highly lucrative seven-figure salary increase. I sat at their polished mahogany conference table, smiling with polite, absolute indifference. I smoothly slid my formal resignation letter across the wood, informing them that I was permanently retiring from corporate accounting. I no longer needed to hide my immense wealth in the shadows or pretend to be a compliant, quiet employee working for someone else's bottom line. I walked out of that building for the last time, stepping fully into my power, and took over the daily public operations of Vanguard Equities as the primary chief executive officer. Operating in the light fundamentally changed the scope of my empire. The sleek, glass-walled executive suite at Vanguard was no longer just a place I visited in secret. It became the command center of my absolute financial dominance. I spent the first few months aggressively liquidating the remains of Trent's fraudulent startup, Velocity Logistics. I sold off his server hardware for pennies on the dollar and dismantled his stolen intellectual property. But true power is not just about destroying those who wronged you. It is about building impenetrable doors for those coming up behind you. I took the recovered capital from Trent's liquidated assets and established the Vanguard Genesis Fund, a multi-million-dollar venture capital initiative strictly dedicated to funding businesses founded by brilliant, underrepresented Black women. Instead of listening to entitled men pitch vaporware algorithms, I sat across from highly educated, fiercely driven women who had been repeatedly denied traditional commercial banking loans. I funded a biotech startup, developing revolutionary maternal health diagnostics. I backed a logistics company, run by a former military engineer, that actually achieved what Trent's fake app only pretended to do. I became the exact mentor financier and absolute powerhouse that my mother always refused to acknowledge. I was no longer just claiming my seat at the table. I had bought the entire building and was building my own tables. The stark contrast between my soaring reality and my family's catastrophic downfall was brought into sharp, visceral focus on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 8 months after the FBI raid. I was hosting a private dinner party for several of my new venture capital partners, and I needed to pick up a few specialty items. I drove my luxury sedan to a highly exclusive, premium organic grocery store in a wealthy suburb of Atlanta, ironically just a few miles away from the luxury apartment complex Kendra had been brutally evicted from. I was wearing a sharp-tailored charcoal pantsuit, an expensive trench coat draped elegantly over my shoulders, and carrying a genuine designer handbag that I had bought with my own hard-earned cash. I placed my items, a wedge of imported truffle cheese, fresh organic figs, and 3 bottles of highly rated vintage Cabernet, onto the black conveyor belt of the checkout lane. "Did you find everything you were looking for today, ma'am?" the cashier asked in a monotone, deeply exhausted voice.
I looked up from my phone and my blood ran absolutely cold for a fraction of a second before a wave of supreme, untouchable confidence washed over me. Standing behind the cash register, wearing a highly unflattering, oversized green polyester apron over a cheap polo shirt, was my sister, Kendra. Her meticulously maintained Buckhead housewife facade was entirely gone. Her hair was pulled back into a messy, frizzy ponytail, the expensive blonde highlights severely grown out. The designer makeup she used to spend hours applying was replaced by dark, heavy bags under her eyes, a testament to the grueling reality of working double shifts on her feet just to afford a tiny, dilapidated apartment on the industrial outskirts of the city. Kendra looked up to scan the barcode on my wine, and she froze. The barcode scanner slipped from her trembling hand, clattering loudly against the plastic counter. All the blood completely drained from her face as her wide, horrified eyes locked onto mine. For a long, suffocating moment, neither of us said a word. The ambient noise of the busy grocery store seemed to entirely fade away, leaving only the profound, staggering chasm of our current realities. "Sienna," Kendra whispered, her voice cracking with a pathetic mixture of profound shame and deeply buried, lingering bitterness. She looked down at my imported groceries, then at my diamond watch, and finally down at her own polyester apron. "Hello, Kendra," I replied, my voice projecting absolute, unyielding calm. I did not sneer, nor did I gloss. My utter indifference was 1,000 times more devastating than any insult I could have hurled at her. Kendra's hands shook as she picked up the scanner and slowly processed my items. The silence between us was deafening. But Kendra, incapable of gracefully accepting her own self-inflicted ruin, could not resist one final, pathetic attempt to play the victim. "I hope you are happy," Kendra muttered bitterly, refusing to make eye contact as she forcefully shoved my expensive cheese into a brown paper bag. "Trent is rotting in a federal cell. Mom is about to lose her house to the legal fees. I am working 50 hours a week here and another 30 at a cheap retail outlet just to feed Harper. You destroyed our entire family." I reached into my designer handbag, pulled out a sleek titanium credit card, and tapped it against the payment terminal. A satisfying beep confirmed the transaction. "I did not destroy this family, Kendra." I stated my words, cutting through the air with surgical, lethal precision. "I simply stopped financing your delusions. You and Trent chose to commit a federal crime. Mom chose to weaponize her love to protect a thief. You built your entire life on a foundation of entitlement and stolen money, and gravity finally caught up with you." I grabbed the handles of my paper bag. Kendra stood entirely paralyzed behind the register, her eyes welling with hot, humiliated tears as the customers in the line behind me began to stare. "Tell Harper that Aunt Sienna says hello," I added quietly, "and tell her that when she turns 18, if she wants to learn how to actually build an empire instead of marrying a fraud, she knows where to find me." I turned on my heel and walked out of the sliding glass doors, leaving Kendra standing frozen in the absolute wreckage of her own terrible life choices. The cool, crisp Georgia air hit my face as I walked to my car, and a profound, unshakable sense of peace settled directly into my bones. Today, I am sitting peacefully on the sunlit wooden dock of my beautiful, fully restored lake house. The broken locks have been replaced with impenetrable state-of-the-art security systems, and my expensive artwork hangs proudly back on my freshly painted walls. I take a slow, satisfying sip of vintage red wine from a delicate crystal glass. The warm breeze gently ripples across the calm, pristine water of the lake. I look out at the beautiful, endless horizon, feeling the weightless joy of absolute triumph. My family tried to bury me beneath their toxic expectations. They tried to steal my sanctuary to fund their fake reality. But they merely planted a seed that grew into a massive, impenetrable fortress. I am completely free, incredibly wealthy, and finally living at perfect, lasting peace. I close my eyes, facing the bright afternoon sun. This ultimate victory is mine. I survived their cruelty, and I won.